You eat clean, you never miss a workout, and you track your macros to a T. So why is your period missing? Turns out those healthy habits might actually be the reason. I'm Lindsay Lesson, registered dietitian who helps active women restore ovulation and get pregnant naturally. And here's what I see all the time. What looks healthy on the outside might actually be suppressing fertility on the inside. There can be a bit of a hidden cost of these healthy habits like intermittent fasting, low carb dieting, or doing a ton of high intensity repeated workouts. All of these things can lead to leaving your body in an energy or calorie deficit. Now, let's break down where these things can kind of go wrong so you can avoid them and fix your fertility. Number one, high intensity workouts. The problem isn't necessarily in the workouts itself, but it's when these workouts are done repeatedly without proper rest days or without proper pre or post workout nutrition. Beyond the fueling component, high intensity workouts can raise our stress hormones like cortisol, and cortisol can actually interfere with the hypothalamic pituitary ovarian or HPO axis. And that can lead to the suppression of ovulation even when energy intake is adequate. Now, the goal here is not to cut out all training, but rather to find the right balance of movement, proper fueling, and stress management for your body to be able to ovulate regularly and get pregnant. Let's talk about intermittent fasting. I am not here to argue that intermittent fasting is wrong for all people in all situations. Maybe it's working wonderfully for you, but maybe it isn't. For women who are active and engaging in 3 to 5 days or more of physical activity, intermittent fasting more often than not kind of turns into a recipe for disaster for your hormones. In fact, in active women, we have research that supports that the longer someone's body is in a calorie deficit over the course of a 24-hour period, the less likely they are to experience a regular ovulatory menstrual cycle. Fasting also just typically kind of lowers your overall energy intake, more likely to put you in an energy deficit, which can lead to the downregulation of hormones. Low carb dieting is also another kind of health trend that I see have a negative impact on women's hormones, especially when they're physically active. Now, remember, carbohydrates are our body's preferred fuel source during exercise, and carbohydrates help keep our blood sugar levels stable in between meals. Frequent blood sugar crashes from low energy intake or low carbohydrate intake can actually start to create a pretty significant stress response in the body. When blood sugar levels drop too low, the body will actually start to pump out stress hormones in an effort to bring blood sugar levels back up. It does this by mobilizing stored forms of carbohydrate in the form of glucose to make blood sugar levels stable. Now, this response is totally normal in the short term. We all have those days where we just get a little bit too busy to eat, or we forget to eat, or we go too long in between meals. But it's when this is done repeatedly or intentionally through prolonged fasting or rigid dieting that the body kind of remains in this constant state of stress. And over time, that chronic stress signal can signal to the brain that this is not a safe place to reproduce or make a baby. And the result? Disrupted hormones, suppressed ovulation, and you guessed it, a missing or irregular period. It's important to note that this can happen to someone even if their BMI is normal. In fact, 95% of the women that we work with who have missing periods due to functional hypothalamic amenorrhea are a normal BMI, and some are even on the higher end of normal. Weight is really not the best indicator of how well someone is fueling, especially from a hormone or fertility perspective. So what are some signs that you're under fueling for your fertility? Number one, a missing or irregular period. Now, before you go down the rabbit hole and assume that this is you, I always recommend having a formal workup done with your PCP or OBGYN. If you are getting some sort of period, I would recommend having cycle day 3 labs done, having your estrogen, your FSH, and your LH tested, along with free and total testosterone. This can help you to kind of understand where your hormones are at the beginning of your cycle and identify any potential imbalances that might be leading to the lack of ovulation. I also recommend running an ultrasound to make sure that there's not some sort of structural issue preventing you from bleeding. Now, if you have amenorrhea, like a lot of the girlies that we work with, you could technically run these labs at any time. Really important step for understanding what's missing and how to get your cycle working again. Another couple of signs that you might be under fueling for fertility would be cold hands and feet, a lowered core body temperature, constant food thoughts, and low libido. Let's talk about what's going on with all of those. When the body is low on fuel, it is very smart. It is constantly trying to seek out more nutrition, so it's going to put food on your brain more often. It's also going to ramp up those appetite hormones in the short term. So you might find yourself kind of low-key obsessing about food. You're comparing what you're eating to what everyone else is eating. You're watching a ton of what I eat in a day videos. You're thumbing through cookbooks. You're pinning recipes. You're watching cooking videos. Your brain is hardwired to get you fed. So even if you are intentionally fasting or restricting food, your brain might actually be encouraging you to eat more. Another sign is, again, that low core temperature. You would recognize this if you're taking basal body temperature, tracking your fertility, but you might also notice that you are just someone who runs a little bit cold. You're always reaching for that extra jacket or sweater when everyone else in the room seems to be totally fine. You might also notice that you have disrupted sleep. Waking up in between 2 and 4 a.m. is almost always a sign that our blood sugar level is dropping too low. And again, one of the reasons why blood sugar would be dropping too low is because you aren't eating enough during the day. And then the third sign that you might be under fueling for your fertility is having normal labs, but no ovulation. Now, again, there can be a lot of reasons why your body isn't ovulating, and having that cycle day 3 blood work done is going to be an important clue as to what might be going on with you. But something that isn't talked about enough, especially in the active and athletic population, is how hypothalamic amenorrhea can actually exist on a bit of a spectrum. On this far end over here, we have our regular ovulatory 25 to 35 day cycles. As the body becomes a little more stressed and possibly underfueled, you might start to notice that you have something called luteal phase defect, which means that the time from when you ovulate to the time that when your period arrives is shorter than 10 days. This tells us that the body is not prioritizing progesterone production because it's too stressed. As the body becomes more stressed and potentially more undernourished, you might start to notice that your cycle becomes irregular. Your cycle could be really short, less than 25 days, maybe it's 18, 20, 22. In a cycle that's that short, you are probably not ovulating. On the other hand, you might notice that you are ovulating, but it's taking your body a really long time to get there, meaning the body doesn't really have enough reserves and energy to have ovulation happen on that routine schedule. So maybe you're not ovulating until cycle day 40, 50, 60, 90, something like that. And while this may not seem like that big of a deal, when you're actively trying to conceive, you really want that chance for pregnancy every single month. Moving further down the spectrum of missing periods, you might start to notice that your irregular cycle is now anovulatory. So not only is it not coming when you really want it to, but you're noticing that you're skipping over ovulation altogether because your hormone levels are too low. And finally, we might be drifting into amenorrhea, where we're going 3 months or longer without a period at all. And the most confusing part, you could fall into any of these scenarios on the spectrum that I just described and have normal labs. So how do we fix all of this? Let's define what a healthy lifestyle for boosting fertility actually looks like for active women. Number 1, it's eating enough overall calories to support your hormones and to support making a baby. For most active women, that means eating 3 meals per day and anywhere in between 1 and 3 snacks, depending upon your genetics, your occupation, the state of stress that you're in, how depleted your body is, and any planned physical activity or exercise. If you've actually lost your period and you're in recovery from hypothalamic amenorrhea, emphasis on eating more snacks and more frequently. We want these meals and snacks to be made up of an equal balance of protein, carbohydrates, and fat, and emphasis on the carbs and fat. Most of the active women that we work with actually do pretty fine on protein, and it's the carbs and fat that are lacking the most. Carbohydrates are, of course, important for keeping blood sugar levels stable and signaling that safety to the body, and fat is actually a precursor to hormone production, so both are super important. If you are somebody who follows a plant-based or a vegetarian diet, there's also research that shows that incorporating more animal protein back into your diet, if it's something that you can be flexible with, can be beneficial for your hormones and for your fertility. Eating regularly is also important. I recommend eating every 3 to 4 hours to make sure that you are keeping your body biologically fed and keeping those blood sugar levels stable. Finally, we want to make sure that we're keeping the body active, but not too active. 3 to 4 days a week is typically great for most people to reap the benefits of movement, for blood flow, for hormone production, and for stress relief. Kind of crossing over that threshold might be a little bit too much, especially if you're finding yourself further on that spectrum that I described with period loss and anovulation. It's also important to note that if you're an active woman and you have a history of food restriction, overtraining, or disordered eating, that you have enough body fat to support hormone production and fertility. For most active women, a body fat percentage of 22% or higher is most supportive of fertility outcomes. Remember, more softness and less stress equals stronger ovulation. And so to sum it all up, fertility isn't always about doing more. It's about doing what your body needs to feel safe, even if that goes against what diet culture or social media is telling you is healthy. If your period is missing or you're struggling with regular ovulation and you're sick of trying to figure out what is going on, take my free quiz, Fertility Fix for the Fit Girl, to identify what's blocking your fertility and how to fix it.